So recently I had the privilege of presenting in front of the public health community. The topic was how to use health equity to inform programming. And I really wanted to use my platform this year to inform people about the stories of our people so that they understand this is not just about collecting data. This is not just about these recommended amounts of fruits and vegetables that are handed down from these government agencies, but how to really help people get access to a basic right, which is food that is life-giving. So check out my presentation. It is about half an hour long, but maybe you could toss it on while you're on the drive home and let me know what you think if you're so inclined. What is equity? Let's start there before we even continue to move on. Can anybody tell me in your mind what is actual equity or some characteristics of it?
Is it fairness across the board?
Fairness across the board, that's a good one, thank you. What else? Anybody? What comes to mind when you think of equity?
Social justice, maybe?
Social justice, very good, very good. Yes?
Equal access to opportunities and resources.
Very good, equal access to opportunities and resources. Those are all great things. So according to Merriam-Webster, justice according to natural law or right, specifically freedom from bias or favoritism. And so I want to highlight natural law or right for a moment. We're going to put that in the parking lot. It's something I want to come back to a little bit later, but this is what equity is defined as. And I know at some point in our lives we may have seen this or a rendition of it. I've seen one with like sunflowers, seen one with boats before, but in our society, equity and equality are not the same thing, right? So equality, as you can see, we have three people standing, they all have the same thing. But everyone's circumstances are not the same. So what works for someone who's taller is not gonna work for someone who's smaller, right? So what we wanna do is get to a point where we're looking at what resources do people from certain communities or certain backgrounds or that have certain circumstances need so that the end outcome is all the same, right? So that we do get to the point where people have equal opportunity, equal access, but the avenues to get there may not look exactly the same for all people. And so that's what we want to think about when we think of equity. So now that we know what equity is, what do we think we should define health equity as? And I can tell you now the definition of health is the state of being free from illness or injury. So let's merge those two. So the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation provides a pretty good definition. Health equity means that everyone has a fair and just opportunity to be healthier. This requires removing obstacles to health such as poverty, discrimination and their consequences, including powerlessness and lack of access to good jobs with fair pay, quality education and housing, safe environments, and health care, right? So as leaders in this field, it is really important for us to understand that health does not happen in a silo, right? There are all these things that affect someone's ability to make healthy choices, to have access to things that allow them to make healthy choices, to participate in healthy behaviors. And when we think about educating our community about health, we have to think about all those other things that are included and what someone is able to do to have a healthy lifestyle. So we're gonna swing out left for a little bit, but we're gonna come right back around like these circles here. So let's think about what we do, right, in our field. This is the mission of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, all the way up at kind of the top of the echelon of where we are, right? And their mission is to enhance and protect the health and well-being of all Americans. And we fulfill that mission by providing for effective health and human services, et cetera, et cetera. And I went as far as to go to the CDC, and this is a little bit difficult to see, but the CDC works to protect America from health, safety, and security threats, both foreign and in the U.S. And so we've come to this point where there is a threat, right? There's a threat here in our home, and one of those threats that we're dealing with is obesity, right? And all of the diet-related diseases that come along with obesity. And when I think of health education, at least in my community, that's one of the things that we're focused on, and what we can do to educate our community about how they can make better choices on their own so that that threat is neutralized, so to speak, right? So that people can be healthy. And so we know that obesity affects everything from life expectancy to productivity to the viability of future generations. And our mission is to do something about that, to encourage our community to learn about that threat and then do something to change it. And so I'm not going to take long on the stats just because I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but I got my information from the National Center for Health Statistics. We know that obesity is there's 39.8% of adults in the U.S. and 18.5% of youth in the U.S. that are dealing with obesity. Obesity-related conditions include all of these things that are preventable. We know that they're preventable. And so let me ask you a question. When you're out in the field dealing with your populations and your communities, what do most of the people in your community look like?
Black.
Black, Hispanic. What else? Who else do we have? Poor. It begs you to think, well, let me look at these communities and find out what's going on there that's making this the case. So let's take a look. What's going on in the hood? So we're gonna look at a tale of two cities, Inglewood and Santa Monica. We can see in Inglewood, there are 8 grocery stores. 8. In Santa Monica, there are over 40 grocery stores. Co-ops, right? Brand name grocery stores or specialty stores, things that provide certain kinds of vegan cuisine and organic cuisine, things like that. Inglewood has 0 farmers markets. Santa Monica at this time had 4. There are actually 8 farmers markets in Santa Monica. Santa Monica is about an 8-mile city, whereas Inglewood is about 9 miles, and the populations are generally about the same. But when we look at things like fast food restaurants, liquor and convenience stores, Inglewood has over 130 fast food restaurants, over 126 liquor and convenience stores. And I just actually read some data that of the 2,500 liquor stores in Los Angeles County, 1,500 of them alone are in South Los Angeles. And so you start to look at the circumstances that are surrounding the communities that we're trying to educate. Santa Monica, and I told you kind of the stats of how large the cities are, right? Santa Monica has 16 times more green space per 1,000 people than Inglewood does. And so in my classes, when I go and I say to someone, well, we have to participate in more physical activity, that's something I have to consider, right? I can't just say that and assume that that person has the means or the access to be physically active based on the community that they live in, right? 16 times more green space, I found that really interesting. And so then there are all these other factors that we have to think of as well, right? School, the quality of education, even the types of foods and physical activity options that are available to students in school. What are people learning? Blight, safety of neighborhoods, right? Wages, what are people making and how are they able to use the money that they are making? And so when we think about all this stuff, we come back to all these intertwining circles. Remember, health does not happen in a silo. And so we really have to look at how all of those things intertwine and what they really allow someone to do. So let me ask you a question. Do you think that someone's environment, surroundings, has a direct effect on the behaviors that they choose, the choices that they're able to make? Just right, okay. Are people's decisions only as good as their options? So our current kind of model of the way we approach health education, and this is my experience, so please correct me if I'm wrong, is that we focus on the individual changes, right? We have these classes, we have these events, surveys, cookbooks, things we hand out, and we say, well, these are the things you need to know, right? Half your plate needs to be fresh fruits and vegetables. And you should reduce the amount of sugar-sweetened beverages you're drinking, and you need at least 30 minutes of physical activity a day. And all those things are really important, and they're really well-intentioned, right? We never go into a community thinking that we are being discouraging, right, or that we're sharing information that's not helpful. But when we consider all of those other factors and burdens that people are dealing with in their lives, we have to think about kind of the real life implications of what that looks like for somebody. So let's take a real life example. This is just a picture of any family. Some of you may know who this is, but this is just a picture of a family. Here's a woman with her children. She does not have a job, right? So she's on government assistance. And she doesn't eat vegetables, really doesn't exercise, just because that's how she grew up, right? That's what her mother or and their mother and their parents passed down to them. She thought that they were choices maybe of the elite. I know when I was younger, that's what I thought. Oh, vegetables and salads are for rich people. She feeds her family based on what she can afford to feed her family, right? I go to the grocery store, a red pepper costs $2.49, and that's only one portion of the meal, right? If I want to make the rest of the spaghetti, I have to buy the green pepper and the onion and the pasta and, you know, hopefully some garlic bread if I can, right? But the Golden Arches are not too far from me, and I could get a whole meal for the same amount that I'm getting for the pepper, right? Keep in mind that the grocery store is not in walking distance, so once I add the bus fare to that, for myself and my children, that one red pepper is looking more like $7, $8, $9, as opposed to how I can feed my family on a much cheaper menu at a place that's closer to my home, right? So I finally get a job. She finally gets a job. She's making enough money to cover the necessities, right? Bills, getting back and forth to work, childcare, children are growing, shoes are getting worn out, right? Cars break down, things happen. So she has enough money to do that. And it's shift work, right? Because that's what's available in my community. So one shift ends at 4:30, but my next shift doesn't start till 11, and sometimes I don't get off till 2. Sometimes I'm going in 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week. Things can be confusing. All those things play a factor, right? And stress that comes along with that, and the guilt of not being able to spend enough time with my children, and, you know, the rush of having to make sure that we eat before homework gets done, before you gotta get to bed, before we gotta get up extra early so I can get you where you gotta go so I can get to work. There's a lot that goes into that. Any extra money that comes in, she's trying to do something nice for her kids. Let's get out of the neighborhood. Let's go see something that we don't usually see, right? Paying off other bills. And did I mention she's college educated? All of this at the expense of still having to pay back Sally Mae, because we all know Sally Mae don't take no prisoners, right? This is all happening in one household with one person, and sometimes two, right? The burden sometimes doesn't alleviate just because there's another parent in the household. These are stressors that everybody has to deal with in some of these communities. So she gets a slightly better job, finally has health insurance after who knows how long, and the doctor says, you've got to eat healthy and work out, because if you don't, you're going to have diabetes or high blood pressure, right? You're right on the cusp. We hear that often. And she says to the doctor, how, Sway? How when I can't afford the red pepper, right? You're telling me that I have to live a lifestyle that is literally unattainable to me in this current situation, or my life is on the line, which adds even more stress to the situation. And so those are things that sometimes when we have our classes, we may not get that whole story, right? Because nobody asked for anybody to share that story. But those are a lot of the different things that people are dealing with. Here's a little bit more research for you. These are some factors affecting low-income women's food choices. It was a study done by Kristen Wiig and Cherry Smith. They studied 92 low-income women. They did focus groups, and the objective was to investigate factors affecting food choice and their attitudes and behaviors around what they were doing. Almost half the participants were Black, 27% were Native American, 13% were white. And the results really revealed a lot about what was happening in this community. So participants consistently did not have enough food to last the entire month. Because of their environment, they were limited to purchase foods with high sugar content, and they sometimes exclusively shopped at corner stores, convenience stores, things like that. And so as a result of that, their children were learning by the example of their parents. And you can take a moment to read some of these quotes that a lot of the women were talking about, but it kind of really speaks to just the factors that we were speaking of earlier. Stress playing a factor, teaching the children survival skills, right? I know what we should be eating and what would be healthy and all that, and I'm really frustrated that we can't eat that way because there just isn't enough money, right? Making sure your kids are fed and full as opposed to eating for health. You just have to eat to survive. And so we get to this point where we're learning about these institutional barriers. The built environment. right? Communities are built with commerce and convenience and class in mind, right? Santa Monica is built for people that can afford to be in Santa Monica. Inglewood is built for people that can afford to be in Inglewood, right? But it's not fair, it's not just, it's not equitable that the food that I have access to, which is a basic right of all people, the food that I have access to in Inglewood will literally shave years off of my life, and I have to figure out and find a way to make it to Santa Monica to get that kind of food. That's not okay, right? That's not fair. And then just the way our environments are built, so planners, government, developers, they're not inclined to keep people's health in mind. What does walkability look like? Can I even participate in physical activity, or because I have to take a stroller and the streets are all torn up, is that going to be a problem for me and my family, right? Green space, we saw the parks report and how much green space is available to these different communities, and then of course having that access to healthy food. What is the prevailing type of food that's in my environment? What type of jobs are available to me? Currently, people don't necessarily have the luxury of waiting for the dream job, right? We have communities where that's a possibility. There's a cushion, or someone inherited something, or your parents can afford you the opportunity to hold out for a better offer, right? Or wait for your dream job to come about. But a lot of our people are not in that circumstance. They're taking what they can get, sometimes 2 and 3 jobs, just to maintain what they have, right? To maintain that survival. So what's available to me? And then if that's the case, am I able to, again, focus on eating foods that are going to sustain me, or just focus on eating foods that are going to make sure I can maintain? And then our educational system. In its current state, in a lot of these communities, it is not serving the children in a proper way. It doesn't teach in depth about how to live a healthy life, right? We go to school for 12 years, oftentimes way more than that. And I remember in my schooling, not once was I taught what a calorie was, right? Or the importance between eating fresh fruits and vegetables and my health down the line, or what hypertension was. Those are things I didn't learn, right? And those are things I need to learn. But because they're not taught, parents are not able to then pass those things down to their children. And so we have a generation, these generations of people not even understanding what those types of things look like. So we come to something called intergenerational disadvantage, right? We learned through that study that attitudes and behaviors are passed down to our children. And when we have children, we try our best to give them the things that we did not have, right? But that only goes as far as what we know and what we can afford them. And so when you look at things like a lack of access and barriers to earning a living wage, federal policies that interfere with the family's ability to earn, and we're going to come back to that like I said earlier, families are not able to invest in children's health, education, and their futures, right? So we have these stagnant life trajectories where someone's life trajectory should look something like this, where they're always kind of moving on the up and up. And we have these spirals where it looks like things are getting better, something happens and knocks you back down. It looks like things are getting better, but our information, our knowledge only goes but so far. It looks like things are getting better, but there's a policy somewhere in the way that keeps me where I'm at. And so I want to talk about this natural law or right one more time. That was a part of the definition of equity. But one of the things that we also have to think about in this field as we're dealing with these communities is that we live in a country where not that long ago, it was natural law to not consider a black person a full person, right? It was natural law, it was lawful to intern a whole group of people because of a perceived threat, right? It was law to go out on manifest destiny and take a whole bunch of land because we are deserving of it, right? And those are things that our communities know. Those are things that sometimes we may not have the language for, but they're things that we understand on a very deep level, and we understand that it really affects the way that we're able to live our lives. Again, from the education system to the food that's available to me, to how much money I'm able to make, all of those things are intertwined, and it's not lost on the fact that all we're focusing on right now is healthy choices. Those things matter. So we have this picture again, but the reality of what's happening is this, right? We have the same 3 actors, and we have groups of people that have way way all the resources that they need. Gratuitous amounts of resources, because who needs to watch a baseball game from that high up in the sky, right? And then we have other people who are just getting by, right? They're just got what they need to see. And then people that not only don't have what they need, but they have something pulling them down a little bit further. And so I don't know how many of you know of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So Maslow's hierarchy postulates that someone can't move to the next tier of needs before the tier that they're on is actualized and met. He arranged like basic needs in order of sequential importance to the individual, and you can't move to the next tier until you've met and understand the tier that you're on. And so Ellen Satter actually put food needs on the same hierarchy. So let me explain it just a little bit. A person at this level is worried about whether or not they have enough food, right? Do I have enough food to survive? Are my children going to eat today? A person on the blue level, they're now at the point where they can say, well, is this food decent, right? Is this food acceptable to me and my family? On the next tier, that person now just has to worry about, well, can I reliably access the food? Is it something that I'm going to be able to access on a regular basis? Then you can start moving up to things that are a little bit more novel. So does this food taste good to me? Is it something that I want to eat? Trying new foods in the orange tier. So, oh, I'm going to try Thai tonight, or I'm going to try this, I'm going to try that. And then the instrumental foods. And so someone operating at the pinnacle of this is able to say, I want to be vegan. I want to only eat meat on Tuesdays. I want to reduce my sodium intake. I want to eat for my health. I want to bulk up. I want to lose weight. I want to reduce my risk of diabetes. I want to reduce my risk of high blood pressure. And oftentimes when we're in our classes, we're relating to our participants as if they're at the pinnacle of this hierarchy. And sometimes they haven't even moved past here. So it's really something to consider when we're, out in the field, making sure that we understand that there's a whole lot of stuff going into this. Is way bigger than food, way bigger than food. And so those are things that we have to realize and recognize. So what now? How's everybody feeling? That was a lot of information. A lot of information. But the late, great Maya Angelou said it best. Do the best you can until you know better, and then when you know better, you do better, right? So we gained all this knowledge, and now we want to understand, well, how can understanding health equity and what that looks like really inform what we're doing in the field, right? And this is how we do it. Let's talk a little bit further about that. So here are my recommendations. Number one is acknowledging and validating the experiences of the people in the field, right? We have to consider the entirety of the system, from capitalism to classism to racism, because again, this is way bigger than food. There's a whole lot that goes into what shows up on someone's plate, right? You never know if you're in a class and someone has a family member that's working in the strawberry fields and they're on strike, right? Because the conditions under which they're working are deplorable, right? You never know if somebody is foraging for food. You never really know what's going on, but you do have to trust that that community knows that these systems that we live in currently all contribute to those facts, right? They all contribute to them not being able to afford that $2.49 pepper, right? But being able to afford things off the dollar menu. Make space in your lessons and activities to address the disparities and be honest about them and where they come from. It's okay to encourage people to talk about that, to find solidarity amongst themselves with those things. Start where people are, right? Remember that pyramid, and I encourage you, if you have time, to look up the pyramid in your own time. Allow small changes to be a big deal. Just coming to class to get this information is a big deal, right? Despite where someone is on the hierarchy. And helping them address, where if you're not at this point here, where are you? And what kind of things can we help you do or learn to either shift your paradigm or make the changes that you can at this point, and we'll celebrate that and then move on to the next. And then trust people to change the world. This really is about like building relationships with people. these classes are not just kind of, you know, something to do for credits or to get something else out of it. You have to really trust that people can understand this information and can do the best that they can with it, and then can change their environment around them, and we have to show them that. We have to show them that we're not just there for a paycheck or to collect the numbers, but we're interested and invested in their glow up. And so what do we do at SJLI? I'm not going to read this. This is our mission. It's on the website, so I encourage you to visit and see what we're all about. But we have programming that really helps to empower our community, right? It's not just about informing our programs, but empowering people to do things beyond what we can even do for them. So we have, of course, our direct education, right? We're out in the field on a regular basis where the people are. We have many, many sites where we go, from libraries to clinics to senior citizens housing, everywhere, where we're teaching people all of those messages that we talked about before. Half your plate should be this, and sugar sweetened beverages and all that good stuff. We allow them to ask questions. We start where they are, right? We have food tours where we teach people how to shop at the grocery store on EBT, right? We have frozen vegetable, like, I don't really know what to call it, but like frozen veggie cuisine, right? Once people understand, oh, frozen vegetables are actually pretty good, I can use them, and if that's where they're at, then we teach them how to use them, right? Things like that. We have a farmer's market, right? So once you have the education, we recognize, well, in our community, there's not a lot of access to healthy food. This is on hold right now because there's a lot of development going on in Inglewood, if you guys know anything about the city. But hopefully we'll be opening it again soon, and we do accept EBT because we want to make sure, again, people have access. We also have a CSA with the food that we grow and some local farmers. Also accepts EBT, again, making sure people actually have access to the foods we tell them that they should be eating. We grow food, right? We have built over 100 gardens in Inglewood, Lenox, and Hawthorne, making sure that these kids understand that this is important. This is a priority to me, my family, and my school. And so they have these gardens where they can participate, touch, taste, feel, and even gain some skills, hopefully, that they can use later. And then we work with policy as well. And one of the big things about us with policy is we want to make sure that all of those policies are informed by our community, right? If there's money being made off of this, if there's a tax, where's the money going? Is it coming back into my community to benefit me, or is it going somewhere where I'm never going to see it? Is this really going to be helpful to my community, or should we change the language in this way so we make sure the people that need to be affected are affected? And so what we're hoping to do is get to a point where there's liberation, right? Knock the fence down, take the boxes away, so that everybody has an equal opportunity to use everything that they have at their disposal for freedom. That's what we're looking for. So this is really, like I said, a lot bigger than food. It's not just about informing your programming, but actually getting out there and having empathy for the community, understanding on a deep level all the things that are being dealt with, and helping people heal from that so that they can then go on to make better choices. That's about it. I think we're done. Anybody have any questions? Yes.
My question is, talk about empowering the communities that you work with. What strategies have you seen that work best at empowering them to take those steps?
So for us, what works really well is building out. It doesn't necessarily have to be a long-term relationship, but it has to be longer than one class. So what we've done with our health education classes, we created a series so that we're in touch with the same group of community members at least 4 times a month. And so we're able to see, we're first of all able to help them learn a wealth of information, right? So we can break down our classes, vegetables in this class, physical activity here, sugar sweet beverages here, advocacy here, right? And so then at the end, we're able to present to them and say, okay, now you know, so let's challenge each other now before we leave to take the next step and share that information. This is how you can stay involved. Here's the open garden days. Here's the next volunteer event. Here's when the next policy meeting is happening. Where can we plug you in? And that's really helpful. So it really is about building a relationship with people so that they feel that you're invested in them and that they understand that there are other opportunities for them to stay involved and use what they gain from you to do something more. That's what's been helpful for us. Yeah.
How do you recruit and then maintain that relationship with them so they're able to go to those 4 classes instead of just going to one class and then falling off? Like, how do you keep them engaged?
We take everybody's information, and if you don't show up to class, we're calling. We are. We're calling, we're emailing, we're finding out, oh, you didn't come today, what's wrong? Some of our classes are at clinics, so we may actually see the doctor, and the doctor will say, well, the last time I saw them, she wasn't feeling so well, or I remember she was dealing with this. And so we're calling. Sometimes we drop by. We have a really awesome team of peer educators, health educators, and so we have the ability to use their time to be able to really have relationships with people. We remember names, we remember birthdays, you know, we take into account what kind of vegetables you want to try at the next class, and we can prepare something with that. So yeah, we will call you. We will call you. Any more questions? Well, I really appreciate you having me today. I hope that this was helpful for you, and I look forward to seeing you on the field. Thank you.